Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
When folks around the world woke up on November 9th, 2016, they faced a very different world than the one they knew when they put their heads on the pillow. 5 months earlier, Britain had shocked the world with the unexpected affirmation of Brexit, leading to the eventual departure of the UK from the European Union. And then a second earthquake, the election of Donald Trump. It seemed the Western world was on fire with populism, nationalism, anti-establishment fervor. But in the 5 years since, nobody else has dropped out of the EU. The Brexit deal, now in place in England, has been watered down substantially from the original vision of the Brexit movement. Trump was vanquished in the 2020 election and has now been ostracized by his own party's establishment after the insurrection of January 6th. And the Republican Party is a hot mess, just as the forces of globalism that were summarily rejected by voters 5 years ago are on the rise again with abandon. Joining us to try and answer the question of what happened to this Brexit, Trump, populist, nationalist movement is a man who put a lot of energy behind Brexit and has since risen to the position of international author and managing editor at LibertyNation.com, Mark Angelides. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me.
What happened to the populist fervor of 2016?
It's still there, but I feel that perhaps COVID has dampened the spirit, if not the intent behind the movement. A good example for this is actually what's happening in the United Kingdom at the moment. So just a short time ago, we had a series of local elections, and the results were really quite indicative of where the country is politically. See, in 2019, Boris Johnson, he won this huge victory campaigning on getting Brexit done. That was the whole purpose, because you mentioned in the intro that Brexit vote was 5 years ago almost. But of course, Brexit didn't happen on the day of the vote.
Right.
It took a lot of time. There was a lot of political to and froing, a lot of negotiations. And then there was the extended period of semi-membership where everything else was decided. So it really dampened everybody's, because everybody expected, well, many people expected, we'll wake, as you say in your intro, we'll wake up the next day and the world will be changed. That wasn't the case. It was a long, laborious process. But in the 2019 election, Boris Johnson, he took all of these seats, these parliamentary seats that were in what used to be known as the Red Wall Labour seats. So these were places that had never voted Conservative. And so he got that based on the idea of Brexit. So there was still the fire for Brexit and for everything that Brexit represented. And now, even after COVID, when a lot of everybody's just tired, to be fair, especially in the United Kingdom, people have been on lockdowns for a year. And it really starts to wear on your liberty bone. But in the recent local elections, again, these same red wall places, they voted for the Conservatives. And in fact, they even won a new parliamentary seat that since its proper inception in 1974 had never voted Conservative. Now, it's not that people are more conservative. It's just they don't see the left as being willing to carry on with what Brexit promised. Now, I see that happening also in the United States, where the fire is still there, but things take so long to happen that it crushes the flames down to embers, if you catch my drift.
Mm-hmm. Now, there might be a tendency to paint Brexit and Trump with too broad a brush, too intimately intertwined, because the issues facing Brits and Americans are hardly similar. So how much have the two movements actually been similar, different, or interrelated?
I think there's a lot of crossover, certainly. But essentially the joining point, the point where they both intersect, would be culture. Yeah, it seems that both the Trump movement and the Brexit movement was very much about embracing the goodness, I guess you call it, of the culture that you're in. without being mired in the bad aspects that, though they exist, that they shouldn't be the focal point or even the leading point or the overarching theme of your life, which is what a lot on the political left on both sides of the Atlantic seem to want to push at the moment. Very much so with the cultural relativism and the critical race theory. But in my view, the two things are still very much entwined. There's especially when it comes to dealing with the threat and the ideology of globalism.
You know, Mark, I've always thought we should call the MAGA movement the first movement, because Donald Trump said, unbeknownst to most, that not only should Americans put America first, but that every country should put their own interests first, and we'd have a better world. It does seem that at least more than one country in Eastern Europe is following the Brexit Trump ideology, so to speak.
There's a few, actually. There's Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, collectively known as the Visegrad nations. But what they seem to be doing is, as you say, putting their countries first, but they're doing it in a way by they're working internationally. So it's nationalism with an internationalist perspective rather than a globalist perspective. So they're cooperating where they need to in terms of standing up to the EU or putting together packages that they can cooperate on. But it really is each of those countries for themselves, and that's not a bad thing. And Viktor Orban in Hungary, he's as popular as he ever was. There's certainly some controversy around him, especially if you read the European papers. But he's very much in the Trump model, as in it's my country first, and everybody else can go whistle in the wind. But I think it's the way of the future.
Okay, Mark, so wrapping it up, give us a sense of what you envision happening in and to the international populist movement, so to speak, in the next 3.5 years leading up to the U.S. election in 2024.
Okay, well, as I mentioned earlier, I think that the fire has died down a little bit. The embers are still there. And for those who've done basic woodcraft, what you really need there is oxygen. So it's really a question of what oxygen can be given to the populist movement. I was reading recently a book on the Senate throughout the ages. So before the Roman Empire, before the Empire, before the Republic, from the kings and all, and how long their system really lasted. And what you found was that so many of these families, these political families, they would adopt a populist platform in order to gain political power. And then once they had it,
right,
they would strip back into them being the establishment until somebody else came along with the next populist movement. And then the first populist would then be the old guard.
Right.
And so I fear that's what's really happening at the moment, in terms of we've had populist movements come and we've had a lot of people jump on board of that bandwagon. And then once the main fire has sort of dwindled out, they've slipped back into the positions they were in before. So I think it is still a burning ambition for many that the populist movement, the international populist movement, carries on. But what's needed is something stable within there, a stable person fanning the flames of the first movement, as you'd call it. And I think that's possible. I see that's what Donald Trump's trying to do at the moment. He's certainly staying relevant, even though he's not on social media. It's still revivable, but it needs a stable force to keep it in the public mind.
Thanks as always, Mark.
My pleasure.
Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Mark Angelides, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Scott Cosenza, and this is Liberty Nation.
Now let's take a look at the LibertyNation.com electoral leaderboard. It's still 238 for Joe Biden.
What if stories and legends can offer us the key to unraveling the hottest political issues of the day and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics?
Impeach 45!
Only where freedom of speech is honored can people who look, sound, or think differently be truly free.
If you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other is zero.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now president.
With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
LibertyNation.com